The 1259 Treaty of Paris marks a crucial moment in the history of Anglo-French relations, encapsulating the complexities of medieval diplomacy, feudal obligations, and territorial disputes. Negotiated between King Henry III of England and King Louis IX of France, the treaty was designed to resolve long-standing conflicts stemming from the Norman Conquest and the Angevin Empire's subsequent territorial expansion. While the treaty brought temporary peace, it also reflected the challenges of navigating a feudal system that interwove sovereignty with vassalage. Let us examine the treaty's origins, key terms, implementation challenges, and lasting impact while situating it within the broader context of 13th-century European politics and diplomacy. The deep roots of the Norman-French conflict. The origins of the Treaty of Paris lie in the broader historical tensions between England and France. These tensions were not simply territorial disputes but a clash of overlapping political systems, loyalties, and ambitions. The Norman Conquest and dual sovereignty. The Norman Conquest of 1066 was the first critical turning point in this saga. When William the Conqueror became King of England, he retained his title as Duke of Normandy, making him a vassal to the French king under feudal law. This arrangement created a paradox: the King of England was both a sovereign ruler and a subordinate of the French crown. This tension became more pronounced as subsequent English monarchs sought to expand their territories in France, challenging the authority of the French monarchy. The Angevin Empire, a superpower in the making. The Angevin Empire, established under Henry II in the 12th century, represented the zenith of English influence on the continent. At its height, this empire stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees, encompassing key regions such as Normandy, Anjou, Maine, Aquitaine, and Gascony. However, this dominance came at a price. The vastness of the empire created logistical and political difficulties, while its existence threatened the French monarchy's ambitions to centralize power. The rivalry between Henry II and Philip II of France, Philip Augustus, set the stage for decades of conflict. The collapse of the Angevin Empire under King John in the early 13th century was a major turning point. Philip Augustus capitalized on John's political and military failures, reclaiming Normandy, Anjou, Maine, and Touraine. By 1214, the Treaty of Chinon confirmed these losses, reducing England's continental holdings to a fragment of their former size. This dramatic shift in the balance of power became a source of grievance for successive English monarchs, including Henry III, who sought to reclaim their ancestral lands. Feudal obligations and the sovereignty dilemma. The feudal system that underpinned medieval European politics was both a source of order and a breeding ground for conflict. Feudal obligations required vassals to provide military service, loyalty, and homage to their lords. However, the dual identity of the English monarchs, sovereign rulers of England and vassals to the French king for their continental holdings, created an enduring dilemma. For the French crown, this arrangement provided a justification for intervention whenever English kings failed to fulfill their feudal duties. For the English monarchy, it was an uncomfortable reminder of their diminished status and dependence on French goodwill. This dynamic fueled repeated disputes over loyalty, sovereignty, and territorial control, ultimately necessitating diplomatic solutions like the Treaty of Paris. Henry III's predicament. By the time Henry III ascended the throne in 1216, England was grappling with the consequences of King John's failures. Henry inherited a kingdom weakened by baronial revolts, financial strain, and the loss of critical territories in France. His reign was marked by persistent challenges, both at home and abroad. Domestic challenges. Henry faced significant opposition from his barons, who were dissatisfied with his governance and the erosion of feudal liberties. The Magna Carta, first issued in 1215, had established limits on royal authority, and subsequent years saw continued tensions between the monarchy and the baronial class. Henry's financial mismanagement and his reliance on foreign advisors further alienated the nobility, culminating in the Second Barons' War, 1264 to 1267. In this context, securing peace with France became a priority, as it would allow Henry to redirect his resources toward addressing domestic issues. International pressures. Internationally, Henry struggled to reclaim the territories lost by his father. His campaigns in France were costly and largely unsuccessful, further straining the English treasury and undermining his credibility. By the 1250s, it became clear that diplomacy, rather than military action, was the only viable path to resolving the Anglo-French conflict. The Treaty of Paris was thus a pragmatic response to these challenges, reflecting Henry's recognition of his limited options. The diplomatic process. The negotiation of the Treaty of Paris was shaped by the personalities and priorities of the two monarchs. Louis IX, known for his piety and commitment to justice, approached the treaty with a sense of moral responsibility. As a devout Christian and future saint, he viewed diplomacy as a means of achieving peace and stability, aligning with his broader vision of a unified Christendom. Henry III, on the other hand, entered the negotiations from a position of weakness. His goal was to salvage what remained of England's continental holdings while avoiding further humiliation. The involvement of intermediaries, including the papacy, reflected the interconnected nature of European politics during this period. The treaty was framed not only as a bilateral agreement but also as a broader effort to promote peace within Christendom. Terms of the treaty. The Treaty of Paris outlined a series of provisions designed to address territorial disputes and establish a framework for peaceful coexistence. First, territorial concessions. Henry III renounced claims to Normandy, Anjou, Maine, Touraine, and Poitou, recognizing these regions as part of the French crown's domain. In return, Louis IX acknowledged Henry's right to retain the Duchy of Aquitaine and several smaller territories, provided Henry accepted vassalage to the French king for these lands. Second, feudal homage. The requirement for Henry to pay homage to Louis was a symbolic but contentious aspect of the treaty. It reinforced the feudal relationship between the two monarchs, underscoring England's diminished status. Third, dispute resolution mechanisms. The treaty established protocols for resolving future disputes over territorial boundaries and governance. This reflected a growing sophistication in medieval diplomacy, as both sides sought to institutionalize a framework for peace. Fourth, marriage alliance. The marriage of Henry's son, Edward, later Edward I, to Eleanor of Castile was a key component of the treaty. This alliance strengthened ties between the English and French courts, promoting stability and mutual cooperation. Challenges in implementation. Despite its significance, the Treaty of Paris faced numerous challenges in implementation. One of the most contentious issues was the requirement for Henry III to pay homage to Louis IX. This act, while symbolically important, was politically fraught, as it highlighted England's subordination to France and undermined the perception of English sovereignty. Territorial disputes. Disputes over the exact boundaries and administration of territories, particularly in Gascony, persisted even after the treaty was signed. These conflicts revealed the inherent limitations of the treaty and the difficulty of reconciling competing interests. Domestic opposition. In England, the treaty was met with mixed reactions. While it provided a respite from costly wars, many barons viewed it as a humiliating capitulation. This dissatisfaction contributed to the broader discontent that characterized Henry's reign, ultimately culminating in the Second Barons' War. The treaty also underscored the divergence between royal and baronial priorities, highlighting the fragmented nature of English politics. Consequences and legacy. The Treaty of Paris had profound implications for both England and France, as well as for the broader European political landscape. Temporary stabilization. The treaty brought a temporary halt to hostilities, allowing both kingdoms to focus on internal matters. For Louis IX, it provided the stability needed to pursue his crusading ambitions, while for Henry III, it offered a reprieve from financial and military pressures. Precursor to the Hundred Years' War. Despite its promise of peace, the treaty failed to resolve the underlying tensions between England and France. The territorial disputes and feudal dynamics that it sought to address remained unresolved, contributing to the outbreak of the Hundred Years' War in 1337. The treaty's inability to establish a lasting resolution underscores the limitations of medieval diplomacy in addressing structural conflicts. Influence on diplomatic practice. The Treaty of Paris reflects a growing sophistication in medieval diplomacy, as both sides sought to institutionalize mechanisms for dispute resolution and mutual recognition of rights. It also highlights the role of marriage alliances in promoting political stability. Consolidation of French power. For France, the treaty represented a significant consolidation of power. By securing recognition of its territorial gains, the French crown strengthened its position as a dominant force in European politics, laying the groundwork for further centralization under later Capetian and Valois monarchs. Broader historical context. The Treaty of Paris must be understood within the broader context of 13th-century Europe, a period marked by the centralization of royal authority and the emergence of more complex state structures. In France, the Capetian dynasty pursued a policy of consolidation, reclaiming lands and asserting royal authority over feudal lords. The treaty contributed to this process by reinforcing French control over key territories and reaffirming the feudal hierarchy. In England, the treaty reflected the limitations of royal power during a period of domestic instability. Henry III's reliance on diplomacy over military action underscored the financial and political constraints that shaped his reign. The treaty also highlighted the interconnectedness of European politics, as evidenced by the involvement of the papacy and the use of marriage alliances to strengthen diplomatic ties. Conclusion. The 1259 Treaty of Paris represents a pivotal moment in the history of Anglo-French relations and medieval diplomacy. While it achieved a temporary peace and reflected the pragmatic leadership of Louis IX, its concessions and ambiguity sowed the seeds for future conflicts. For Henry III, the treaty was both a necessary compromise and a symbol of England's diminished status on the continent. In the broader context of medieval European politics, the treaty exemplifies the challenges of navigating feudal obligations, territorial ambitions, and the shifting dynamics of power. Its legacy, marked by both its successes and its limitations, continues to illuminate the complexities of medieval statecraft and the enduring rivalry between England and France. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe to Medieval Chronicles 1066 for more journeys back to the Middle Ages. Stay curious.